picture it, me at 17 at a friend's house, playing video games and hanging out. I have to shit really bad. It's the Taco Bell shits. The kind that are really greasy and it takes forever to wipe. Like 16 feet of toilet paper leaving streaks the whole way through. I say I'll be right back and hit the bathroom. I start releasing the colon Cthulhu a fraction of a second before my ass hand slapped the toilet seat. Sweet relief. I reach for the toilet paper. This is when I notice the roll was all used up. I look around, no TP anywhere. Stranded on the first floor of his house without a single square. It was too awkward to yell for help. I look around for alternative wipe ammo. 2 things. His dad's new car mag and his mom's Bible. Faced with an ultimatum. His dad was huge, he loved cars, and was prone to aggressiveness. His mother was a sweet lady, very small and soft-spoken. I would feel really bad if I did that to her. But his dad could kick my ass. Also, he doesn't give a damn about religion. I rip a few pages from the middle of the Old Testament. Most Christians don't read that anyway. The paper was thin. I'm getting lots of paper cuts in my ass crack. 10 pages later, I'm clean. Pulling my pants up when a second wave hit. I didn't even have time to flush the toilet. Poo lasagna mode engaged. After the 3rd round, I sat for another 20 minutes just to make sure everything was out. By now, my friend is outside the door, asking if I'm okay. I just say I'll be out in a few, just passing some used burritos. I clean myself up for the 4th and final time. By now, 1/4 of the Old Testament was noticeably gone. The toilet has more in it than his plumbing can handle. I have to act fast. He's outside the door. I tried plunging, but there's too much paper. This time I make sure that there's some antibacterial soap by the sink. You see, my hands can be washed. I roll up my sleeves and reach into the toilet and start pulping the solid mass as I'm on my hands and knees processing the Purina Romney Chow. I noticed the full roll of toilet paper that was sitting on the toilet backing this whole time. I flush the toilet with my elbow. It starts overflowing. Half the pages of the Old Testament smeared with shit scattering across the floor. I rip the lid off the tower, desperately trying to unstick the cheap-ass plumbing. The tank empties. Did I fuck something up? The toilet starts making this really loud, gurgly chainsaw sound. My friend starts pounding on the door, yelling, "What are you doing?" Over the span of 40 seconds, the sound gets even louder and deeper. It turns into a grinding sound, wearing down, then stops. The whole time in shock, with shit-covered hands on my forehead. My friend kicks down the door, yelling. He stops mid-sentence, staring at me. I'm wide-eyed, smeared with shit on my face, and hands. There's some on my jeans, even. My heavily brown-tinted water and soggy pages of the Old Testament, all coating the floor. Mom's Bible sitting forgotten on the floor, soaked with shit water. By now, I hear his parents' footsteps coming down the hall. My friend is standing there, staring, doesn't know what to do. His mom comes in, shocked, starts tearing up and whimpering a bit.
My grandmother gave me that Bible a month before she died of cancer.
His dad comes in a few seconds later, shocked, but sees the Bible pages and starts laughing. Starts walking away, still laughing. He screams at the end of the hallway.
You know you're fucked, right?
My friend's mom starts wailing and crying.
Why did you do that?
Over and over, in a very hysterical manner. I start crying too, but I look like a pissed off baboon when I cry. She thinks I'm sneering at her and walks away, crying harder. I hear his dad cracking a beer in the kitchen. I turn to my friend and say, "Look, I can..." But I couldn't even finish my sentence before he punched me in the face. My cheekbone was stinging. He grabs me by the hood of my jacket and forces me out of the house. I see his mom bawling and picking up the phone as we pass. Out on the street, a mile from my house. No ride. Covered in shit and paper. I start walking back to my house. 30 minutes later, a lady stops and asks if I need a ride. I get in. The lady starts driving. I get self-conscious about the shit drying on me. She's making small talk. A minute later, she smells the shit stank and looks at me. She pulls over on the side, hard. My head hits the window. She starts screaming at me in Chinese and gesturing for me to just get out. Yeah, she was Asian, but she had perfect New England accent. It surprised the shit out of me. So I get out of the car. Later, a fat guy in a pickup truck asked me where I was going, offered to let me hop in the cargo bed, and then I take that ride home. I sneak past my parents and take a shower. I try to call my friend over and over again to explain myself. No answer. The fourth try, my friend answered and screamed at me to stop, and then hung up. Over the next week, I notice the neighbors and classmates looking at me a lot. I start hearing Mom Hater, Satan Boy, and Ass Testament behind my back. Nicknames spread through school like wildfire. Younger kids I've never met or talked to, barely even looked at, coming up to me and saying them to my face. One of my closest female friends, who is a Christian, got distant and eventually stopped talking to me. The story gets to the teachers. A few days later, I get called into the principal's office. The superintendent is there. Tells me that they're expelling me for gross ridicule of religious beliefs. My mom and dad find out. My mom starts acting really weird around me. More tense. Looks at me a lot. Feels like she thinks she doesn't know me. Dad thinks I'm just being some kind of deviant. I need strict structure and reform. 2 hours later, he's on the phone with an army recruiter, volunteering me for boot camp. Fast forward to boot camp. It's alright at first. First couple of days were sore, but a few days in, my body gets used to it. One day, I get a package from home from a few people at my school. It was a stack of pictures of me, photoshopped to look like I was wiping my ass with the Bible. On the back of each picture, there's a nickname. Overly curious guy comes over and takes them from me. A few moments later, the whole barracks were sharing the pictures and laughing their asses off. A couple of them even found my friend's email and asked for the story. Later, I notice one of the other guys looking at me a lot. I find out that he comes from an ultra-conservative family, and that he hates me for what I did. He bumps into me later, and I try to make small talk. When no one else was listening, he told me that if he were ever in combat, he would shoot me and say it was Arabs. I start noticing the drill sergeant singling me out. One day, we start training with live ammo. The day that we started training with live ammo, I go into the bathroom in the morning. barely even notice everyone is watching me. On the toilet, I realize that the paper has been removed, and there's nothing in the room except for a Bible. I start yelling. I get laughter in response. Everyone goes to training and leaves me there. I start ripping pages from that Bible and wiping like no tomorrow. The paper cuts make my hole bleed. Blood starts dripping everywhere. I can't put on my uniform without staining it. I rip out a stack of pages and roll them up. I put them in my crack like a hot dog in a bun. I ripped out some more pages and fashioned myself a makeshift King James diaper, and I wear it underneath my uniform. Audibly crinkly, but I'm too late for training. I hope we're shooting again. Turns out to be marching in formation before weapons training. 10 minutes in, the drill sergeant notices the sound. The drill sergeant makes us stop and asks who's reading the paper. The guys start looking at me. The drill sergeant makes me jog in place. Loud crinkling commences. He asks what the hell that sound is. My throat closes. I can't answer. He orders me to drop my pants. My King James diaper exposed to the world. He swears low and tells me to run 200 laps around boot camp. I had no choice, so I did. Half an hour later, I'm running through less visible wooded side of camp. None other than Mr. Jesus Avenger, who said that he would kill me if he could get away with it, pops up from behind a bush. He's got a bottle of Jack in one hand and a huge handgun in the other. He smacks me in the face with the bottle and shoots me in the foot, pours the bottle over my face and in my mouth while I was screaming. He runs away. The drill sergeant comes looking for me. The incident gets logged and investigated. Turns out Jesus Boy fed them a line of bullshit story, said that I've been harassing him about his religion and mocking him by defacing his Bible. I get discharged for religious intolerance, drinking, and recklessness. I found out later he only got a formal warning about going AWOL in the Army. With all of this behind me, I move back in with my parents. My dad's rather disappointed in me, and my mother just won't talk to me. I start putting in job applications. My name and story have spread. No businesses around town wanted anything to do with me. A month later, my father thinks that I'm a bum, and that I haven't been looking for a job. He kicks me out. Homeless, I start drifting. This was probably the worst point in my life, but it gets better from here. I become a vagrant for 2 years. Dehumanizing. Disgusting. That was at first, though. I got food from homeless programs during the day, went drifter and started going town to town on foot. Eventually, digging through garbage when I got very hungry at night. The first winter I met and became friends with 2 other drifters. Their names were Bub and Shaky. He's called Shaky because he drank so much that it messed up his motor functions. Bub's girlfriend died of a heroin overdose 3 months before. I met them under a bridge on the outside of town. We traveled together and kept each other company. I wake up in the middle of the night once to a weird sound. I saw that they were pleasuring each other in a way that I was unwilling to do. But I'm no one to judge. I go back to sleep. A month later, they tried to kill me. Bub, Shaky, and I were walking through town one day and see a $50 bill. We're all thinking booze. I want Jim Beam, but Shaky's an alcoholic. He wants as much cheap $6 vodka as he can get. Fuck you! I found it. Bub comes at me with half a pair of scissors out of fucking nowhere. He stabs me twice in the leg, grabs the money. Dirty ass pals run away. I never see them again. 3 days later, I get a fever from the infection. I collapse on someone's stoop for a few hours. Pus from the wounds seeping through my torn, dirty jeans. A cop pulls up and tells me to keep walking. I try to stand up. My leg just hurts too much. The cop comes over and yanks me to my feet. Yells, "Get moving!" Throws me forward. I grab my leg in pain. The wounds were open and bleeding again. The cop finally sees my condition. He takes me to the homeless shelter the next town over. He doesn't say a word to me the whole way. At the shelter, a cute redhead comes in with a first aid kit and a box of gloves. She seemed upbeat and genuinely sorry about my wounds. First time being treated like a human by a female in a long time. I sprout a boner, throbbing in my pants. She sees. A vague look of disgust flashes over her face. I feel bad and apologize. She kind of laughs nervously and treats my wounds. She gives me a tube of topical antibiotic and tells me that it won't get me high, and it's only worth a couple of bucks. So much for being treated like a human. After a couple of days, the wounds start to heal. The shelter gives me the boot, and I get back to drifting. Fast forward a few months and it's winter. Wandering through a new, more urban town, it's 1 a.m. The roads are empty. Found a winter jacket, just my size, in a Goodwill donation bin. Walking along, I see a lady on a corner. I know she's a hooker, but she's barely wearing anything. It's freezing out. She's shivering. I go up to her and just say hi. She asks if I have cash. I say no. She tells me to fuck off. She sounds tired. I offer my jacket. She looks at me strange for a few seconds. Says that she can't cover up on the job and thanks me anyways and smiles. She's not all that skanky looking, a little worn, but there's still a spark of dignity about her. I stayed and made small talk with her, to keep her mind off the cold. Around 3 a.m., a dirty Pontiac pulls up. A heavy-set Latin guy at the wheel screams for Denise. Ah, so her name is Denise. He gives me a 1,000-yard stare and asks if I'm a customer. I say no, so he tells me to fuck off. As I walk away, he starts smacking her and asking who I was, and throws her in the car. I wondered about her all the next day. I sleep in a vacant alley. The next night I came back to that corner, and she was there. She had a black eye and was counting bills on the sly. Cautious at first, she said Sam will cut us both up if he sees me again. I tell her I'm passing through. I sit behind a box in the alley, behind her, out of sight. We talk all night, in between customers, of course. Almost 3, she tells me to get lost before Sam comes around. So I do. It goes on like this for almost a month. We form a bond. We're friends. The drifter and the hooker. She jokes that there should be a kid show based on us. One day, Sam came rolling up in his Pontiac, a few hours early. Sam pinned me against the wall and pointed a gun at me, and calmly asked who I was. I just said, I'm a drifter. Try to tell him that I'm only friends with Denise. He's got 2 guys with him. They search me for swindled money. There is none. He figures I'm not scoring free poon. I'm too filthy. Drops me, kicks me, and tells me to fuck off. He says I'm tainting the product. Says he'll shoot me if he sees me there again. I dropped in on Denise the next night for only 20 seconds. I said goodbye and walked away. I never saw her again. A week later, I'm on the edge of the urban side of town, eating a can of tuna. I see Sam's Pontiac driving towards me. I duck into an alley, and he stops the car. I hear several people behind me, running. They catch up and they tackle me. I roll over. Sam's staring at me, breathing really heavy. He pulls out a gun and sits on a crate, lights a cigarette and catches his breath. His eyes locked on mine the entire time. Finally, he says something. "Denise is the only reason I'm not killing you today." Turns out that she had made up a bunch of shit to not get me killed. Among those claims, our expert smuggler looking for work told him that I was around all the time and that I'm sneaky. My mind shits itself a little bit before he asks me if I want to make $2,000. Well, hell yes. He gives me a bubble wrap manila folder and told me to take it to the other side of town. He didn't trust his guys not to get shot. Told me he'd kill me on the spot if I refused. Naturally, I accepted. He told me if I didn't go through with it, he'd kill Denise. I told him I would do it. He gives me the folded napkin and the address, and Yellow Beetle written on it. IGTFO. I went to the address. There's 2 Chinese guys sitting in a Beetle. I go up to the window. One sees me and pulls out his gun. I stop and pull the envelope out of my coat. The window slowly rolls down. I hand him the package and walk away. A few blocks down, I hear yelling and tires burning out. I turn around. The Beetle is rushing at me. The passenger with a gun pointed out the window. I hit the ground as they drive past. Then I duck down a side road. After a while, I think I had lost them. Walking over a bridge, over the river. Gonna hide out until I know they're gone. Halfway across the bridge, the Beetle reappears. I try to run, but I get a bullet to the leg. The car stops and the Asian guy gets out. Nobody else around. He picks me up by my collar, but it rips. Grabs me by the neck, shoots me twice in the stomach, and throws me over the rail. "Oh, shit!" is the only thing that filled my mind as I hit the icy water below. I remember floating down into the wilderness, flanking the urbanized town, trying desperately to stay afloat. I got really tired, really weak. I began to lose feeling in my arms and legs, bumping against rocks. The last thing I saw was a dot of light on shore ahead. I wake up. I'm now covered in a brown fleece blanket right next to a roaring fire. I stand up. My worn clothes are hanging from a stick, drying. There's a pair of damp moccasins by the fire, drying. I look around in a daze. I hear the river rushing a few yards away. There's a fucking teepee pitched under an oak tree, and an Indian standing outside of it. Smoking pot, of course. I try to get up. He tells me to lay down and get warm, or I'll die. I lay back down and fall asleep. A few seconds later, he's shaking me awake. He tells me that it's dangerous to go to sleep when I'm that cold. Turns out the Indian, this balding middle-aged guy with pot and glasses, is named Hector. Hector tells me that he's making a spiritual journey on foot to Arizona. He's full Navajo and wants to meet his relatives in a reserve. Asks if I want to join him. I say yes. I mean, free pot, right? We spent the next 6 months walking to Arizona. At first, I took him for a guy in a midlife crisis. But as we traveled, we bonded. He taught me how to hunt, how to fish, how to keep myself clean in the wilderness, how to craft my own clothes and supplies from the fat of the land. Once we got to the desert regions, he taught me how to survive like a Navajo. He came from a U.S. background, but he's definitely done his research. One day, we found a peyote plant. He was really happy and asked if I wanted a spiritual awakening from his people. The bastard got all mystic on me. and told me that I would find my spirit guide. In the moment, I agree. Being high on peyote was the most surreal thing I have ever experienced. Strange, soothing sounds all around me. Time and space keep rearranging themselves. I see a temple made out of eyes. A fox tapped me on the shoulder and then ran inside. I followed. There's a human figure made out of water standing next to me. We walked the same. We moved the same. In the temple, there was a roll of toilet paper. My mind went into this weird, highly perceptive loop. A weird moment of clarity in the insanity forming all around me. I realize this moment, the strange nature of life, a spiral of events spurred by a single missed roll of toilet paper. This is fucking insane. I'm doing peyote in the desert with a drug addict Native American because of toilet paper. What the hell happened? The rest of the high was an ocean of blurred images and colors. I forgot my revelation until much later. The next day, we reached the reserve. When we walked into the reserve, we got funny looks. A half-native outsider with a scruffy white guy. Apprehension begins to fade once we introduced ourselves to a group of elders outside a trailer. It's sunset. There's a cool breeze blowing. There's a smattering of hogans and decorated trailers throughout the reserve. They let us stay if we told our stories. Hector told his. He was a technician in a medium town, yearning for his roots. I told my story, and they laughed. We stayed the night, and then the next night. Nights turned to weeks. Weeks into months. It's weird being accepted after all of this. When we first arrived and got the full effect of the reserve, I don't think it was entirely what Hector was expecting. He was looking forward to nature and mysticism. The reserve has modernized a bit. There was a Navajo artwork, food, and stores, but we had cable TV, internet, and plumbing. He was a bit disappointed, but reconciled. Tells me if you're going to chase your dreams, you have to be ready for disappointment. The people are nice. Let us stay. Eventually, I got a job in a nearby town, a call center, started taking community college classes for IT, studying an A+ certification, and I got a job with a tech firm, on a salary at $26,000 a year, starting. During my stay at the reserve and subsequent success, I caught the interest of a native girl about my age. Her name was Marissa. I save money and decide that it's time to leave. I donate a few thousand to the reserve as a thank you. I get an airline ticket back to my hometown, where Marissa and I had an apartment and jobs lined up. Looking forward to seeing my parents. Planning a surprise visit. I look out the window, watching the country fly by below me. Clear sky. I remember back on how I walked across the land. Not mad about anything, happy and amazed how things turned out. Settling into my apartment and job, I'm clean-cut, wearing a suit. I go back to my parents' old house. My mother answers the door. She looks at me for a few seconds, then faints. When she came to, she started crying and hugging and kissing me. My father couldn't even believe that I was really there. He shed tears for the first time in my life. I've never seen him do that. A million apologies and a million excuses. He said that a few days after he kicked me out, he had a change of heart, that he couldn't find me. 2 years later, he thought that I was dead. One of the happiest moments of my life was to hear him say those words. I had another moment of happiness About 3 weeks later at work. 3 weeks later, I'm at work, working on a queue of PC repairs. I notice the name attached to the machine labeled Bad RAM. The name is of my old friend, the one whose house this all started in. I replace the RAM and boot it up. Proxy string a bunch of child porn, bestiality, and other nasty, nasty things onto his hard drive, hide the folder, and power down and repackage. Later, I do some research and find out that he's now a minister of a local church. Evil, evil smile spreads across my face. I place a phone call to the authorities, informing them of what I found. The next day, his mugshot is in the paper. I find out he's going to prison. He's been excommunicated from the church, and his wife and kids are leaving him. Kids are going to a child psychologist to see if he ever tried to touch them. His life falls to shit. He never finds out who did it to him. The vicious nature of life comes full circle. Bitch. Is this a true story? Is this a lie? That's for you to decide.